I'm excited, and I hope you are too, for today's podcast, because one of the things that is really fun about doing a podcast like this is to show that recovery is possible for anyone, no matter how serious your problems in the past have been, with jail or criminal activities or drug usage. And it doesn't, as long as you're still alive, recovery is possible. So I guess that's a good way to put it. So welcome to this edition of Odyssey House Journals. I'm your host, Randall Carlisle. My guest today, and this is why I'm so excited, is a great guy named Cody. Cody, welcome.
Thank you.
I hope I'm not being too negative to say that you have sort of a dark past.
Yes, for sure.
And you've got a great thing going on right now because you're in recovery and you're trying to get custody back of your daughter. And I mean, it's just a great story. So let's start with the negative. How long ago did all your problems when did your usage begin?
So I started using pretty young. I started using weed around 11. I got into meth around 13, and then been doing it ever since. So about 28 years.
How at 13? How somebody might wonder, how do you get exposed to meth?
So my older brother, he's about 3 years older than me, and he was the older kid. I was trying to be cool with the older kids, and so I got involved with him and all his friends at a young age.
Wow! And what was it about meth that you liked?
So it was the fast life. Back then, I was into doing bad things like stealing cars and committing crimes, and so it was like the fast life, and it was a way to stay up and do those crimes in the middle of the night.
And your family, I don't know if you want to talk about it or not, but there was some addiction in your family in addition to your brother, right?
Yes, my father was a alcoholic and drug addict for about the first 13 years.
Do you think that influenced you? Was it more your brother or your dad or a combination of both?
I think it was kind of a combination of both, but I feel like my brother was more of the influence than my father.
Big brother, you're looking up to him.
Definitely.
And it looks like he's having fun.
Yep.
Right? So when did it stop being fun for you?
It seemed like it stopped being fun about when I was 17. I went to the wilderness program, AYA in Aspen, Utah. Or no, it was down in Loa, Utah, sorry. And I went to that program. I turned 17 in that program. I got out, and then it wasn't very long after I was already in the adult system. So it seemed to stop being fun around then. But I was so addicted to it that it took me 4 prison sentences to finally pull through it.
4 prison sentences?
Yeah.
Wow.
From 2005 up until about 2024.
And somebody watching or listening to this might say, how come like the first or the second or the third time didn't you think about quitting?
I did, but I was so addicted to the fast life, and it wasn't just so much the drugs; it was everything involved with it. And so, even doing a couple years in prison, like the second I got out and I got a chance to go right back to it, I did.
Really?
Yeah.
So, what finally turned things around for you?
So I think really like every addiction, everybody talks about that one time when they hit rock bottom.
Right.
And it seems like, like everybody's rock bottom's a little bit different. And for me, I thought that I hit rock bottom. And then I went to Odyssey. And then about a week and a half, 2 weeks into it, I ended up locking. And that means I left a bond and clinical advisory. So I just took off in the middle of the day. And from that point, it was rock bottom, and that whole entire night just got worse and worse and worse. It came to a certain point to where I was walking up the middle of the street, felt like my kidneys were going to shut down. I was drinking water out of people's front lawns. I was calling anybody I could to try to get back to Odyssey. I couldn't get a hold of anybody. I was going up to the cops asking for my recovery court officer, his phone number just to get a ride back, and there was nobody who would help me. So I had to wait for my parents to wake up at like 7 in the morning, and I called them, and then they just said like, "Look, you just left," and I was like, "Yeah, but can you please pick me up, And they were like, where are you planning on going, And I was like, I'm going back to Odyssey, And they were like, no, like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, just please pick me up and take me back. And they did, and then that's when my recovery started.
And you've been clean ever since.
Yep.
Do you actually walked up to cops and said?
I did, yeah. They had people pulled over on the side of the road by the freeway, and my recovery court detective is a Midvale cop. And so I walked up to the Midvale police and said, hey, like, you guys have his phone number. Can you please give me his phone number? And they were like, we can't give that to you, And so, yeah, I just ended up taking off again. And then it was just a whole night of struggle.
Now, were you using?
I was, yeah.
So what was going through your head when you walked out of the treatment program? That you wanted to use or what?
Yeah, so it was, I definitely wanted to use. Like, that was the first thing I went to. And then when I first started using, I think it was the first time in my life that I actually like went and used and then wanted to go right back to a rehab. Like any time before it was never like that. It was like I would use and then I would just hit the road running, and I would never look back until, I was handcuffed. So
we often hear about, my drug of choice was alcohol, so I can't relate to meth. But we often hear about psychosis that goes along with long-term usage of meth. Did you ever experience something like that?
Yeah, I can actually remember a time when I was waiting for my brother. He never showed up, and I drove my friend home. He was in the back seat the whole time, which I thought was weird because it was only me and him in the car. I went back to shake his hand, and I woke up on my mom's driveway like 3 days later, and I don't remember none of it. She said I was in and out of her house, and I don't remember any of it. So I'm not quite sure what I did in those 3 days, but...
Have you seen other people going through meth psychosis?
Yes, I definitely have. I actually have a loved one I feel like is still in it. So,
and how bizarre! I mean, I guess it's hard for some of us to understand what. So you're seeing stuff and thinking stuff that isn't real,
right?
Right.
Yeah. So like like even in the middle of the night out committing crime, like I don't know how many times I spooked myself thinking people were out like following me or chasing me, and and I would take off, and then I'd realize like hours later that there was nobody there. Now, there was a time I was in a high-speed chase, and I took off into a hotel and ran and barricaded myself in. Cops were everywhere around me. Looked out the window, and there was nobody out there. So
really?
Yeah.
I've heard paranoia is one of the. I used to chair a 12-step meeting, and one of the guys who came all the time was one of the big dealers down on the Rio Grande area back then, and he described to me, and I'd say, this doesn't sound like fun, because he'd say, well, we got high the other night. We were sitting in my little apartment, and I could swear that the cops were outside the apartment, and he had blinds on the window, and he said, I'd get up and I'd look out the blinds, and there's nobody there. And I'd go back and sit on the couch, and like 30 seconds later, I'd think there's somebody there, and it kept doing that all night long.
Yeah, I don't know how many times like we've had cameras set up, and we'd sit there and watch the camera for 8-9 hours a night, and there'd never be anybody on the camera.
But that can't be fun.
It's not that it's so much fun. I think it's that you stay awake for so long, and you're still trying to fight it, because like sleep to me at that point is like, we used to live by a saying, said you sleep when you die, pretty much, So we would try to stay up for as long as we possibly could, and then sometimes it seemed like it'd be weeks at a time, And so at that point, like I don't think you realize like really what's going on,
Wow. So what motivated you this last time when you went into treatment to have it last?
So what really motivated me was I lost my brother in 2015 when I was in Max in prison. And I got out, and I went right back to the same thing that ended up taking his life.
So meth took his life?
It did, yeah. They said that he passed away from a heart attack induced by methamphetamine. So when I kept doing that, and the look in my parents' face, and it was years I continued to keep doing it. And then I got clean, and everybody was so proud of me. And then I got back on cocaine in the middle of a construction company that I worked for years. And I had no idea that the people around me were doing it because I wasn't looking for it. And then one day I walked by and I seen him doing it and I asked to do it. And then by then cocaine was so expensive, I switched to meth. And then, like what really changed me was I ended up going back to the feds for a year. I got out. I got right back on it the second I got off the plane. The person who came to pick me up had it, and I started using with them. So when I walked in the door, my daughter, she was so happy to see me, and like I seen the videos of how excited she was to see me after so long. And I walked in the door the same person that I was when I got taken away from her. And that was like the starting point of it, And then from there, like I just didn't know how to quit. Like I knew like that if I had abstinence from it, that I might have a chance of staying clean. But I just didn't know how to get that abstinence because like I would stay clean for 2 or 3 days and then it would just, I would talk myself into using before I even knew what was going on.
Your daughter was one of the major reasons you've stayed in recovery, and I've seen the look on your face. Maybe we should go back and because people who don't know is that Odyssey House has one of I think the only program west of the Mississippi where it's a parents with kids program, but it involves dads as well. Usually it's just moms and kids.
Right.
And you entered the program as a dad with your kid, and she was how old when you entered? 3?
So she was 3, yeah. She was 3, and so I didn't get her when I first came into Odyssey, so I went to the Lighthouse program. And then it was like right after I locked and I came back, it was like a couple days later that DCFS filed a case on me, and they ended up taking Ava from me. And so it was like shortly after then, I decided I was going to do the parents program, and I got with the main guy from Odyssey Lighthouse. And, like at first they denied me over some things that went wrong, and then I actually spoke about it. I kind of advocated for myself, and they jumped on it and they moved me over. It was probably like a month into it. I was seeing her on the weekends for just the regular visits. And then my second or third court date, they started opening up visits with Ava. And so I'd get her like 3 hours every couple days. And then like it was like in October, there was like a 2-week period to where like she just started coming really, really fast. So it jumped from like having her for like 15 hours to like close to 40 hours a week. And then in the November 8th, she ended up moving in full time. And so she's been with me for 3 months full time.
And for those of you who don't know, it's you live together, right?
Yeah.
In a house, and it's a limited program with 16 adults.
There is, yeah.
So you said there are 5 dads right now.
Yep, 5 of us.
So 11 moms, and how many kids? 20 or something?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like right now we're outnumbered by the kids for sure. Yeah.
So what's it like with a 3-year-old? You're going through treatment,
right? And
she basically is too in a younger sense, right? Describe that.
So it's kind of weird because like, for a 3-year-old to say, she got therapy today, it was kind of like odd for me at first, but it seems to like, honestly, like there's a therapist there. He's a family therapist. And he's been a child play therapist for 13 years at Odyssey.
And he's really cool.
Oh, yeah, he's really cool. And so, like, I actually had family therapy with him and her yesterday, and he teaches you ways to, like, identify her emotions and how to let her know that it's okay to feel, like, what she's got to feel. So, like, with Ava, I've never, like, kept anything from her. Like, I've always tried to be honest with her about it because I've always wanted to teach her that what she's going to come up against, because I can never keep her away from the drugs. Like, she's going to come across it sometime in life.
Sure.
But I want her to realize what the outcome could possibly be if she does choose, to use. So,
and in the daily routine in the parents program, you guys take your kids down to our child services place, and then you go back to the house and go through groups and things like that.
Yep. So early in the morning, we wake up, we have breakfast. After breakfast, we get them all ready. we meet in the day room at 7:30 every morning for In With Kids. So In With Kids is an activity for parents to do with their children. All of us are in the room together. So on Monday and Wednesday, the therapist runs it. On Tuesday and Thursday, we run it. Just depends on which person of the house is going to do it that day. We pick our activities. We do it for an hour, and then we get the kids ready. We take them down to CS. The whole entire house goes down, takes them all down. We drop them off at CS. We go back, and then from about 9:15 to 12, we have a therapy group, just depending on the day. It's usually a level group or a parenting group. And then we have lunch, and then we go back to it from about 1 o'clock till about 3 o'clock. And then after 3 o'clock, we have our department from 3 to 5, and we go down, pick up the kids, come back and eat dinner.
Now, I've observed you, because we occasionally have meetings in the building that's above where the kids are every day, and they have a playground out back. And I have seen you looking out the window of the room where we meet, seeing your daughter down there. And I got to tell you that I've observed, first of all, there's a big smile on your face, and there's a ton of love.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just, it made me feel good seeing you feel so good. So it must be rewarding what you've gone through to gain reunification with your daughter so you can be legally a dad again.
Yeah, so like it was so weird. The one thing for me was like she was a tablet kid, and she liked her mac and cheese and all her little extras, but like for her to give up everything like that just to come to be with me was enough for me to realize that's my number one goal in life right there, is to be the best father I could possibly be for her. For some 3-year-old child to give up everything that she loved and has ever wanted just to be with me was enough for me to realize that I just wanted to be her everything.
Boy, it's going to take a lot of work in the future, especially if you're doing a single parenting kind of thing. What do you see for your future? Because Lord knows it's difficult with a criminal background. You're going to move into sober living, which is a transition that goes through the treatment program you're part of. But after all that, are you going to try to graduate from Odyssey, go through IOP program, or?
Yeah, so right now I'm on a Voyager track out. So
Good.
In the parents program, they haven't had anybody reach the level that I've reached in over 18 months. So there's different levels. You start out as orientation, then you go into a compass, and then you go into a disco. When you become a disco, you're looked at as upper house. So you start having more responsibilities. You're the one that structures people to their appointments. And then from there, you can become a navigator. And so they haven't had a navigator in that house in 18 months.
Wow.
And so I was the first one in 18 months, and I became the house supervisor. So yeah, I mean, like from there, I'm going to do an outpatient program with Odyssey on a Voyager track to graduate. So I step from a residential down to an outpatient, which will be on Wednesday nights for 4 hours. And then I do a personal therapy group once a week. And then, of course, work full time. So,
Wow. It'll be a tough road.
oh, yeah, definitely.
Well, how do you think you're going to handle? I mean, obviously, with the years that you've been doing drugs in Utah, you're going to run into people who dealt drugs before. Right. How are you going to deal with? Are you going to stay away from people like that, or how do you?
So yeah, I mean, like I don't think I'm ever going to be able to stay like fully away from people using drugs. But like in the program, we learn different skills, coping skills, DBT skills, just different ways to work through. Like when you have that triggering event, there's different techniques that we use. Just when you start to feel that rush and, like you get to that mindset of, like about right before you're about to use, there's different coping skills that we use. So I ended up volunteering and doing harm reduction down here one day. And out in front of harm reduction, there was people actively using, I was sitting there. So in one point of it, I was watching people use, and I had that triggering event. And at the same time, like down at the bottom was CS. That's where Ava was at, and it was like a shining moment for me to look and see that, okay, that's the life that I could right now just give up and go run and be with, or I could still fight and be for that little girl, And so for me, like every time that I have one of them triggering events, I just think back to that moment, I just think of her in that window smiling at me, like just dancing around and trying to get my attention, you know, because that's the one thing in that moment, which was for me, the biggest triggering moment since I've been in recovery. But that was the number one inspiration for me right there. So.
Is she a happy child?
She is, yeah. She's extremely happy. Like, she don't have no complaints. Like, and it's like, honestly, like, is really awesome because it teaches her a lot of structure. It teaches her how to wake up in the morning and get ready and brush her teeth and comb her hair, and to be on time to things. And so, like, she don't really fight me on anything. Like, if I say, come on, we got to go, like, she's more than happy to jump on my arms and go. So,
does she understand what happened with you in terms of, I mean, does she understand addiction at all? Or
I kind of really believe she does. So the way I've kind of explained it to her was that we've made a lot of bad choices, you know, and because of those bad choices, we have consequences, you know, and so because of those consequences, like every single day, like we have to fight to not go back to that same lifestyle, you know. And I know she's only 3 and she's gonna be turning 4 really soon, but like when I talk to her, I can fully see in her eyes that she understands. You know what I mean? Like she might not be like, you know, my dad's fighting addiction or, you know,
Right.
but she understands that, you know, from where dad was at to where dad is now and where dad's going, you know. And so I can just, every time I talk to her about it, I can see it in her eyes for sure.
does she, I can't even remember what I remembered from an early age. I think it was around maybe 4 or 5 that I can remember back to now as an adult. What about you?
I think it's about like 4 or 5 for me.
So she may not remember everything she's gone through up to this point.
Yeah, and so that's like one thing that my parents kind of were saying, and Recovery Corps was like, you know, like she's at an age right now to where like you can make that life change, and she won't know you from that person that you were before, you know. And like I told him, yeah, but I will, you know what I mean? And so that's like my motivating factor is, you know, she might not remember like all the bad things that I was doing and all the struggles I had to go through, but I will, you know. And so that's what I use for my motivation to not go back to it.
What's the hardest thing about staying sober when you've been dealing with addiction for as many years as you have?
The hardest thing right now for me is probably having to start from ground zero, you know. So like I have an option of if I wanted to, I could go live with family, you know, but I've always wanted to do it my own way, you know, like, and I've wanted to go through sober living, and I've wanted to have to build my own future, you know, because I felt like if anything was handed to me like it was before, that it was so easy for me to throw it away because it wasn't something that I myself had to work so hard for.
So what in terms of a future job, profession, or anything like that, what are you looking at?
So right now I'm in the JETS program with Odyssey. It's a junior executive in training. I plan on completing the JETS program, graduating, finishing my associate's degree, and then hopefully coming back and work for Odyssey as a peer support specialist. But I think in the meantime, like I went to Workforce Services and I told them I don't care what job it is, if it's flipping hamburgers or if it's anything, it doesn't matter what it is, like as long as it puts food on the table for her.
I think, you know, it sounds like you've got things pretty well determined how you're going to work, how you're going to live in the future. Yeah. And what's really cool is that you're gauging it all in terms of helping your daughter grow up in a healthy environment.
Yeah, because like I know, like I don't want to say like my family put me in a rough environment growing up, you know, but it taught me a lot, you know, like and I know like if I made the same choices that were made back then around me, that I would put her in that same position that I was in, you know.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I didn't want to do that to her, you know, like, because I know the outcome of what would happen if I did raise her in that kind of environment.
So let's wrap up a little family stuff. So the brother that you looked up to, the older brother that you looked up to when you were 13 or whatever,
right,
dies from an overdose, yeah, or drug-related causes, right? And you said your dad was in addiction as well.
Yeah.
How's he doing?
So he just celebrated his 10,000th day, July 24th of last year.
How many years is that?
So he quit in 97. So I think he's had about 18.
Wow.
Yeah, about 18 years clean.
Was he a meth addict?
So he used meth, but he's more like an alcoholic, but he was a social user of everything. So yeah, he ended up, when he quit, he went to a rehab, you know, and I never, for years after, I thought he would always fall back into it, you know, because that's what we've always seen, you know, and that's what a lot of people know about addiction, you know, is like people just go right back to it. But he came home one day, and, you know, I was a young kid starting my addiction, and so we batted heads a lot over it.
I'll bet.
But I watched him, you know, start on a 10-speed working at a car wash with 16-year-old kids, you know, and he's went through the struggle every single day, you know, and now he's way successful. So it's good to, you know, it's like, it's hope, you know, like I know now, like he was around my age when he quit, and, you know, now he's 64 and he's doing great.
How old are you?
I'm 41.
41. So that's a lot of years wasted, but you got a lot of years left.
Yeah, for sure.
The cool thing. Kudos for you for recognizing what you can do. So he set an example, and you can set an example for your daughter.
Yeah, definitely.
What I can see how you guys were butting heads all the time, because he went through the work of overcoming his addiction. He's in recovery, and he sees you dealing with addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how many times he came down and would bust me in the middle of it, you know, and like he finally told me, you know, after a while, like he was like, you know, like we had some separation, because he said every single time that he would catch me with something would put him at risk at wanting to do it, you know? And so he would
thought about that.
Yeah. He would fight and struggle through it, you know, and eventually, you know, like we just separated, you know. But what's so weird is like after I grew up and I kind of, you know, matured a little bit and I started working on my recovery, like him and my mom are like probably my biggest support, you know. So like, and it's not like I don't have to like sugarcoat it or lie to him or, you know, like I think one of the hardest things I had to do in my recovery was actively tell my parents that I was an IV user. So like, you know, like there's nobody in my family that's ever used IV wise, you know? And so I started doing it in prison, and I ended up catching Hep C from it. And so I ended up doing the Maverick, getting clean, but actually telling my parents, you know, that, hey, I'm not just doing it, but I'm using this way, you know, for me was one of the hardest things, you know, because just to see the look in their eyes, you know, to know that their son was an IV user, you know, like, to me, it was like a turning point for me.
What was their initial reaction? Well, first of all, why did you admit that? Because you had Hep C, or?
Well, no. So I was in the backseat of their car. They picked me up from a rehab, and they could tell that, you know, that I was really out there. And, you know, they asked me. And at that point, when they finally asked me, like, I didn't want to lie to them, you know, like I just wanted to get everything out in the clean and get it out in the open and kind of let them know, like, you know, what I was up against, you know. And from there, you know, like they got with me, and we got with the University of Utah doctor. He ran his testing, gave me my medication. And what's so weird is I was still using while I was doing the medication. And my parents, like there was times like you can't stop taking it within a 24-hour period or you'll become resilient to Hep C. So you can never cure it. And there was times where I was like pushing the 24-hour mark, and my dad would go and get my medication for me and bring it to different counties for me to make sure I took it, you know? Wow. And then in the end of it, yeah, I've been undetected ever since, so.
Wow. Thank you it's hard sharing personal stories like this, but hopefully it'll have some influence on somebody either watching or listening to this podcast. Hopefully. So thank you.
Yes.
And good luck in the future. You're a good man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And a good dad.
Thank you.
Seen the love in your eyes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, good luck to you and your daughter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Cody.
All right.
And thank you for watching or listening to another edition of Odyssey House Journals.